Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inside Jacksonville and the First Coast. Pleased to have with us this morning a gentleman I have not had the pleasure of meeting before, Mark Goldwich. Gold Star Adjusters, your company, I think. You're a public adjuster, Mark?
Correct.
The reason, and somebody, one of our co-workers put me on to Mark, and he has a book out which is called Uncovered, What Really Happens After the Storm, Flood, Earthquake, or Fire, etc. With storms constantly coming into our area around this time of year, as we were recording this, and this is in late August, and as we're talking, we have Hurricane Dean that is headed into the Yucatan Peninsula. And then we had Katrina. And I've heard so many horror stories about coverages or lack thereof. And I started wondering, do I really know what's in my policy? Do our listeners really know what's in theirs? We had a nor'easter several weeks ago where trees were downed, etc., and some people said their policy didn't cover that. So the purpose of Mark being in here, as a person who's worked on both sides of the ledger, insurance companies, and also has real estate licensing and as an adjuster, is to try and inform you, the public, as to what you should be aware of in relation to your insurance policies and claims filing and where the stumbling blocks can be. Mike, so far, am I right on target?
Absolutely
okay.
Right, and I certainly do hope to help you with that.
Okay. In looking at this book and in looking at my policy, one of the things that jumped out at me, probably more than anything else, is the question of wind/flood coverage. Now, I will admit, in my area, I'm not going to say where it is that I live, I'm told I don't have to have flood coverage. One of the points in your book is you're saying maybe that's not always the best advice.
Correct.
Why?
Well, whether or not you are required to have flood insurance, it's really comes down to that word required. If you're not in a flood-rated zone...
Exactly, where I'm not.
And if you don't have a mortgage company, if you buy a house and you're not in that flood zone... if you do have a mortgage company,
right,
when you buy a home, if you're not in that flood zone, the mortgage company will not require you to buy flood insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't buy flood insurance. They go by the federal flood maps,
mm-hmm,
which can change over time. And as you know, there haven't been significant flooding in this area in quite a number of years.
Yeah.
So,
other than normal backups on some of the streets, but that's different story.
Correct. But from a storm situation,
mm-hmm,
there not have been significant floods in this area in many years, decades. That could change with the first storm, where you might not be in a flood zone this year, but after it floods significantly, they may redo the flood maps, and then next year you're in a flood zone. Well, that doesn't help you if you don't have the flood insurance this year.
All right, let me interrupt on one thing, Mark. Talking flood insurance and flood zones in particular, one thing just clicked in my mind here. We have had so much construction and building and new subdivisions and everything. Now, granted, they have stormwater ponds and all of this. Is it possible that would change flood zones from year to year? And let's say I've had my insurance policy for 20 some odd years. My house is 20 years old this year. So I've had it 20 years, no flood insurance. Over that time, I actually could be in a flood zone now and not know it.
Absolutely.
Now, what should I do? Who should I call to find out if I'm in a flood zone, number one? And then I have a second question on that.
Well, I would say you contact the National Flood Insurance Program, mm-hmm, and get with them or FEMA to verify whether or not you're in a flood zone or how close you are to a flood zone. But again, because these are just maps that are done over time, it may just be that it hasn't flooded yet, and they don't suspect that it's going to flood, but that doesn't mean it won't flood. All
right, now I had a second question related to that, related to flood insurance. I'm not in a flood zone. Many of our listeners may not be in a flood zone out there. Should we still have flood insurance?
I would say unless you are very sure, very confident that your area is not going to flood, not that you're not in a flood zone, but that your area is not going to flood with a significant storm, you should have it. I'm not in a flood zone. I have flood insurance. Mm-hmm. I happen to live not too far from the river, and I am just concerned that with the right circumstances that there could be flooding in the area. The flood policy is a relatively inexpensive policy. If you're not sure I would, like I do personally, err on the side of caution and get the flood policy.
Interesting. Now, I also noticed in the reading of the information that I found from you is that sometimes, and again, without understand, folks, we're not trying to criticize insurance companies. We're trying to help you understand your policy and maybe things that you should do to change your insurance policy because of the situation we are in here in Florida. I'm maybe 20 miles from the beaches, but a nice big Category 5 hurricane could move through like it did up in the Carolinas one year, and, I could be affected. You said something about wind damage. Let's say a wind blows your roof off, and then subsequently the house floods. You don't have flood insurance. It was caused by the wind that was blowing the roof off. But because the house is flooded, that may not, the insurance company may not pay for that because it's flooded. There's a very thin line there.
Right. Because you have to keep in mind, after an event like that, the home is it's a disaster. And when the adjusters come in to review the damages, sometimes it can be hard to tell where the water came from. Did it come from the flood or did it come from the wind? And that, of course, has been a big bone of contention since Katrina.
Yeah. And now what about Katrina? We're, 2 years from that? And aren't there people still trying to get claims finished?
Absolutely.
In this day and age?
A large number.
Now, what causes that? Again, without insurance bashing, what causes that? Is it because it was so monumental and that the insurance companies, one of the things you've talked about is you've had to hire people. They have to hire so many people that they get overloaded. The people they have to hire are in between. They're not in between jobs. They're not sure of what they're filling out or filing on the claims or not. Kind of answer that for me.
Right. Katrina, of course, was unprecedented in size. Probably can best be compared to Hurricane Andrew, which hit Miami in 1992. And after an event like that, you have such a large number of claims. There's no way that the insurance companies can keep up with them or have on hand enough employees to handle them all the way that even they would like to. But it's just such a large number that they have to take in what's called independent adjusters. And these are adjusters that don't work specifically for the insurance company. They work for independent agencies that are hired. It's kind of like an outsourcing.
Yeah, okay.
And
good point, good way.
They bring these adjusters in so that they can get to a large number of the claims quickly. But then there's always disputes and differences of opinion as to whether water caused the damage from flood or from wind. After a storm, when the water is gone, a lot of times a garage door that's blown in looks the same as a garage door that was pushed in by water, by flood water. And so you come to the loss after the fact, and you look at this home, and one person will say that garage door was blown in by wind, and another will say it was pushed in by water. And that's how you have such a large number of discrepancies.
Another thing is, didn't you say in the information I got from you that one adjuster may have, as many as 150?
It can be more than that. They could come in and they can get 10 claims, 20 claims, 200 claims. It just depends on the adjuster, the company that they're with, the workload at the time, the number of other adjusters that haven't made it to the site yet. The first adjusters in, they may get a large number of claims, and then as additional adjusters come in, then they recirculate those claims back out to the adjusters that are coming in.
So not the same person may be working your claim.
Correct. And you may get one adjuster initially get your file. They may even make contact with you, but then they get called somewhere else. They get relocated. They have something happen to them personally, and they have to either give up the file or they have too many files and the files are taken away. And so they're reassigned to other adjusters, and that is, of course, is a problem for people. They can have their file reassigned to a number of adjusters before the home is even inspected.
I know you're thinking as you're listening, what can I do? And at the end of the book, he has 10 commandments that I think are kind of interesting, and I'm going to have you point those out, or we'll read them at the end of the segment here. But with that in mind, then, it seems to me, and we've already talked Katrina, people are still 2 years later trying to get their claims settled. And I'm not talking about with FEMA either. What should people consider as a reasonable amount of time for getting a claim settled?
If it's an ordinary claim that is not disaster related, a reasonable time should be 30 to 60 days. That should be the reasonable time. After a catastrophe, you can expect that the claim would take anywhere from 30 days would be very quick after what's called a mega catastrophe like a Katrina. 30 days would be extremely quick to probably 4 to 6 months, I would say, would be about average.
Average 4 to 6 months.
Correct.
I'm trying to find those 10. Did you have those 10 there, by the way? In the we'll go through those in just a second. I want to follow up on a couple of other things. Warning sign number 10, et cetera. I had it marked, and we'll make sure we. Okay, there we go. The commandments. I want to make sure that we read those before, because we're about 2 or 3 minutes away from the end of the segment. But one of those commandments, I think, is people need to be aware of what they've got in their policy, or if it's not in there, it's something we need to alert people to. Go back and read your policy. And the thing that I have found in just talking with you for a few minutes is we don't know when the flood zones are going to change. If nothing else, they should alert themselves as to whether they are in a flood zone or not, or at least go ahead and spend the money. And by the way, it's the government, by the way, that handles that, right?
Correct. So the insurance companies don't really pay the flood claims. They adjust the flood claims, but it's a federal program, so it's the federal government that pays or reimburses the insurance companies for those flood losses.
And how do people determine how much the loss is? I mean, you've got, if there's building damage, you have contractors you're needed. If you have flooding damage, you have flooring contractors are needed. If you have roofing, you have roofing contractors. How do the insurance companies determine what's a good amount to pay?
Well, they all use pricing programs, computerized estimating programs. They get them from a few different vendors. And that is another bone of contention after a loss, is that they're using different pricing programs. They can adjust them independently. Each company can adjust the programs that they get. It's almost inevitable that after a large catastrophe, prices go up very quickly and immediately because there's a lot of labor being brought in from other states, and there are additional expenses involved.
All right, let's go through those 10 commandments. If you want to just read, we don't have to elaborate on them, but at least read the headline for each one, starting with number 1.
The first one is do not try to pull one over on your insurance company.
Yeah, don't scam the insurance company. Yeah,
their fraud investigators are some of their best trained personnel. They know how to sniff it out, and this is something you do not want to try to do, especially in Florida. It is a crime.
Yeah, so be honest. Number 2.
Number 2 is take notes. This is something that's very simple, but a lot of people overlook it. Just get a legal pad or a pad of paper handy, and every time you talk to somebody from the insurance company, a contractor, FEMA, whoever it is, anything related, note it down. When you talk to them, what the conversation was about, and the outcome, and then of course keep track of expenses, your time with the claim. Anything related to the claim, keep notes and keep good track of things.
Number 3?
Number 3 is take pictures. Mm-hmm. This can be video or still or digital, of course. And this is before after the loss.
And after. Okay, before and after.
Right.
Good point. I have my pictures of my belongings are in a safe deposit box.
Because when it happens, you won't believe what you'll forget.
And,
and they will just tell, it's up to you to prove what you had, where it was, and how it was damaged, and those kind of things.
Okay, what's next?
Number 4 is show the adjuster all of the damage. Don't leave it up to just the adjuster to walk around and find the damage. You take a good look before the adjuster comes, note it all down yourself, and then when the adjuster gets there, make sure they take the time to look at all of the damages, because they have a schedule that they have to try to keep. And a lot of times they just are not able to spend as much time at your home as you would like.
Okay, number 5, and we have about 2 minutes left.
Number 5 is remind the adjuster that not all homes are built with the same materials.
Yeah.
They use pricing programs, like I said, that are built for average homes with average damage. Most homes are just not average. So make sure that you know what your home is made of and that you can point these out to the adjuster.
Okay, number 6.
Number 6, review the adjuster's completed estimate in detail until you understand it. And this is sometimes hard to do because these estimates, use a lot of construction jargon, but you just have to make sure that somebody from the insurance company explains that estimate to you in enough detail that you understand it and agree with it.
Okay, next.
Have a licensed general contractor review the insurance company estimate and provide an independent estimate.
Okay.
Because obviously everybody that looks at your damage is going to have a slightly different opinion of what it's going to cost to fix.
Okay.
But make sure that the contractor's licensed, of course. Number 8 is if the insurance company refuses to pay for an item, demand that they explain in writing why they're refusing to pay for it. They're obligated to do so.
Number 9.
Number 9 is be persistent. Don't give up. This is where I find most people fail, is that they get tired of going through the process and they walk away leaving a lot of money on the table.
And it doesn't hurt to talk to what you call, and you are, along with your other licensing, a public adjuster. And again, I'm not trying to promote Mark for the business. He's answering questions for us to help you in relation to the thing, but that's somebody who can act for you.
Correct. And that leads into number 10, which is seek professional assistance when needed. And that might not just mean a public adjuster, but an engineer, a mold specialist, an accountant, an attorney, whoever it is. It could be a fine rug appraiser. Get your experts in line and have them assist you with the claim.
The bottom line, Mark, is be informed and know what you've got in your policy and don't have in your policy.
Correct.
And the reason, as I said, we brought Mark in is because with all the storms are bouncing around now, this is hurricane season. Might want to, with everything else preparing, bringing the batteries in, bringing the water in, bringing everything else in, check your insurance policy.
Right. Think of the aftermath. And part of that is you can get with your insurance agent and go over with them in advance and make sure you have the right coverages in line.
Mark, lots of good information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.